Hello, once again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our virtual classroom. Today, we are going to be continuing talking about percents, fractions, and decimals. And so let's go over those things. But specifically, I want to be going over what we call benchmark fractions, decimals, and percents. And by benchmark, I simply mean fractions, decimals, and percents that when you see them, without having to calculate it, you should know what the fraction, decimal, and percent equivalents are. So if you see one of these fractions, you should immediately be able to know what the decimal and percent is. You see one of these decimals, you should know what the fraction and percent equivalent of that is. And if you see a certain percent of these, you should immediately know what the decimal and fraction equivalent is. For example, beginning with the fraction here given to us, which is 1/100th. 1/100th. By way of reminder, we know that a percent is a comparison to the number 100. It is something out of 100. A percent is essentially a fraction out of 100. And so if we have a number over 100, for example, right here we have the number 1, that is 1 per 100 or 1%. This is the same thing as 1%. Very, very simple. So once you see 1 over 100, you should immediately think, oh, that's 1%. If you see 1%, you know, oh, that's 1 over 100, and that is already simplified. In the same way, as we saw yesterday, we can go from a fraction to a decimal by dividing. You should know a fraction means division. A fraction means division. Anytime you have a fraction, you can always divide the numerator by the denominator, meaning the numerator, the top number goes inside. Let me try that again. Top number goes inside, and the denominator would go on the outside. So this would be 1 divided by 100. I know that looks odd, but that's what this is saying. It's saying 1 divided into 100 parts. So 100 cannot go into 1. So we can continue with the decimal. 100 cannot go into 10 either. But 100 can go into 100 one time, giving me this decimal, which if I read it correctly, it is 1/100th, which is exactly what I have over here, 1/100th. So ladies and gentlemen, again, these are all equivalent to one another, and I can go back and forth between them. Let's do another one. 1/4. 1/4 is a very common fraction that you need to be familiar with. 1/4, another way of saying 1/4 is 1/4. And we know, ladies and gentlemen, that 1/4 is 1 out of 4 parts. For example, in a football game, how many quarters do we have in a football game? We have 4, because that means 1 out of 4. We need a total of 4 quarters to make one whole game. And same thing with money. We call those quarters because we need 4 quarters to make $1. So a quarter is 1/4. And talking about money, a quarter is 25 cents, 25 out of 100. So it shouldn't surprise us that 1/4 is equivalent to 25 hundredths. How would I get that? Well, division. 1 divided into 4 parts. So 1 whole divided into 4 parts. 4 cannot go into 1, but it does go into 10 twice, remainder 2, and it goes into 20 5 times exactly. Again, that gives me 25 hundredths. Now, how do I go from a decimal to a percent? Well, we have to remember our favorite fizzy drink here in this class. Decimal to percent, we use Dr. Pepper. Decimal to percent, we move the decimal twice. With Dr. Pepper, ladies and gentlemen, we always move the decimal twice, either to the right when we're going from decimal to percent, or to the left when we're going from a percent to a decimal. So decimal to percent, we move it twice. That will give me 25%. Or 25%, remember that there is still a decimal right there. In fact, it's right here. We do Dr. Pepper, we go from a percent to a decimal, we move it 2 times, get rid of the percent symbol, we're back to 25 hundredths. Now, if you're wondering, well, how do I go from a decimal back to a fraction? Ladies and gentlemen, as we saw yesterday, you just have to say it correctly. This is 25 hundredths. This is the hundredths place. So it'd be 25 over 100, which is 25%. We simplify that, it simplifies again to 1/4. Pretty simple. So that is the case for all of these. 1/2, 1 divided by 2, you need to know is the same thing as 5/10. Move the decimal twice, that becomes 50%. And we can go backwards. 3/4, is 0.75. 0.75, move the decimal twice, 75%. Going backwards, move the decimal twice to the left, becomes 0.75. 75 hundredths simplifies to 3/4. 1/10 is literally 1/10. That's why I say that number. Move the decimal 2 times because of Dr. Pepper. So that's 1, 2. So we put a 0. That's going to be 10%. And then 1/5 is 2/10. With decimal twice, it's 20%. There's two of these that I want to talk about though. We have 1/3. 1/3 is perhaps one of the more confusing one of these, but it's one that you just have to know. Because whenever I divide 1 by 3, ladies and gentlemen, what do I get? 3 times 3 is 9, so we have a remainder of 1, bring down to 0. As you can see, there is no end to it. It is never going to end. When you divide 1 by 3, it creates a non-terminating, meaning it's never going to end row of 3s, 0.3333333 forever. So as a decimal, you need to be able to express that as 0.3 with a line over the 3 indicating that that number repeats forever. But how would I write that as a percent? Well, move the decimal twice, it's going to be 33.33333%. But instead of writing the infinite 3s, we can simply write it like this. In fact, this is a more exact way of writing it. If you don't understand why that works, that's okay. All you need to know is that 1/3 is the same thing as 33 1/3%. 1/3 is the same thing as 33 1/3%, or 0.3 with a line on top, meaning that it never ends, it never terminates. Going back to the very last one down here, we have just the number 1, 1 whole. And if you think about it, if anybody gives you 1 whole pizza, for example, or 1 whole cake, if they give you the whole pizza, how much of the pizza are you getting? Well, you're getting all of it. You're getting 100% of it. Just like if in your class, every single student showed up, then 100% of the students came to school. If you get all the questions right on a test or quiz, what grade do you get? You get 100% because you got all the questions right in that one test. You got that one test completely right. So yes, 1 whole is 100%. And does 1 have a decimal? It does. It's right here, meaning it's 1.0. So we write it as 1.0. That would be 1 whole. If we had 2 wholes, 2 whole pizzas, that would be 200%, 3 whole pizzas, 300%, 10 whole pizzas would be 1,000%, etc. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this was useful to you. I hope that that gave you a little bit more understanding and context of how to go from a fraction to a decimal to a percent, back to a decimal, back to a fraction, and even from a fraction to a percent to fraction. So it is a lot, but just simple things to remember. Fraction means division, which makes it into a decimal. From a decimal, you just say it correctly and you have it back to a fraction. A decimal to a percent, remember Dr. Pepper, you can go back and forth, etc. So these are just some of the little tricks. With that in mind, I will see you next time, ladies and gentlemen.